Okay, everyone, welcome. Class number 3 on Megillas Esther. We're going to finish Be'ez Hashem tonight and conclude this very powerful discourse. We are holding in page 194 in Torah Or, and we are holding by the parentheses in the fourth column, in the second column on page 194. Let's do a little catch up. Okay, so we're learning over here that Purim is explaining why Haman is calling for the horse. We read that everything is so much deeper than what we think it is. Haman is calling for the horse that the king was riding on to give Mordechai a ride. He's thinking to give himself a ride. But we explained that spiritually, because Purim was the time that was the completion of the giving of the Torah, it is for that reason that just like by the giving of the Torah, there needed to be horses. Hashem channels and comes down through the horses. Like it says, Yeshua, when you're riding on your horses, I think it's a pasuk in Zechariah, Yeshua, your chariots of salvation. So God comes riding in down through horses. So we explained, and that was the way the Torah was given, whatever that means. So too by Purim, since Purim is the conclusion of Matan Torah, you have the same features that were by the giving of the Torah happened by Purim. So you have both the garments, because the Torah is the garment for the infinite. So you wear, what does it say? Bring the garment that the king wears. That's bring the Torah, which the Torah is the garment that the king wears. And the horses. The horses are the letters, the holy letters of the Torah. They're the horses. And we were learning what is the significance, because horses are called osios, letters are called, but these are masculine letters, the letters that are flowing from, they're coming down from Hashem to us. And these are letters, as he explained in the Maimer. I'm not going to go over it because it's a lot. It was a 3.5-hour class last week. We discussed that these are, Sus is 2 times, is Gematria 126, numeric value 126, which is 2 times 63, because it's the channeling down of the energies of 63. What are the energies of 63? So 63, we learned, is one of the 4 permutations of God's name, Shem Samach Gimel. And the name of 63 represents the levels where the light of Hashem is shining unrestricted and unlimited with its full power and its full potency. One of the elements of that level is that there's no achizas achitzonim on that level. Because the light is not reduced and not limited, the forces of the unholy cannot siphon any energy from that very high place. And that's why it's called Alma Decherus. It's called the world of freedom. And what that means is when that level of divine revelation is going to be revealed in the world, there won't be any more a possibility for unholiness to exist. Because the unholy needs energy from holiness, in which they usurp and they mischannel and then corrupt it and use that energy in a negative way. But that's only from a place that they can plug into, a place that we might refer to as hackable. There are certain levels of the divine, even God's name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, the lower, like the name 45, is still hackable, because that represents the realm of the world of Tikkun, where the lights have been reduced already and channeled into vessels and become to a very, very great degree constricted and limited. And therefore, there is obviously they can't plug in directly into this nuclear power plant, but they can, through a system of the energy, going through various different channels, it is possible for the unholy to live off this light, this energy. But once the lights of Tohu are introduced, the infinite lights of Tohu, in a way where the vessels can't shatter like the first time. The first time the vessels shattered, but in a way that we are receptive and capable of receiving that light, then the klipa is gone forever. Klipa cannot take from this. That's why we said that Bina, which is the level of 63, is referred to as Alma Dechera, the world of freedom, the world of liberation. And it's a place where you don't need any protection anymore. It's similar to the concept of the difference between Shavuos and Pesach, where Pesach, we still have to watch out for the chametz. That's now we know we're going to go through a rigorous purification, cleansing, home cleansing. We're going to cleanse ourselves out from all yeast, because the yeast represents the klippos, the unholy. They're coming in and they're. But we know on Shavuos in the temple they would bring, the only time of the year they would bring leavened bread. Why? Because on Shavuos is the revelation of this transcendental light. Because Shavuos is the 50th day, 50th is Bina, 50th lights of Bina, the place of freedom, the place of liberation, where the klippos cannot come anymore. In general, we will say that when Mashiach will come, we will be living in that realm. And that's why the spirit of impurity will be removed from the earth. So all of Torah and mitzvahs is a channeling, is leading and making the world, bringing the world to its ultimate aliyah, bringing the vessels, bringing the creation to a level where they can open up to receive what he referred to in the beginning of last week's class as the idea of aliyah sa'olamos, where the worlds rise. Rising of the worlds means that every level it becomes, is able to stretch itself, open up its vessels, its containers, for it to be able to receive higher and higher and higher lights. Ultimately, that we can step out of the limitations of the world of Tikkun and receive the intense lights of Tohu, which is once we are capable of hosting such godliness, such intense godliness, then then there won't be any more possibility for klipa. That's the ultimate Shabbos. Every Shabbos we rise a small little taste of that place, but eventually we're going to be there, and it's going to be the sum totality of all of our Torah and mitzvahs, what we've done. Therefore, since, as we know that as a result of Torah and mitzvahs, we connect the lights of Tohu to the vessels of Tikkun. That's what Torah does. We always speak the concept that through mitzvahs we elevate the sparks of holiness. But the mitzvahs are also done with physical containers for two reasons. Number one, in the physical, we are accessing these sparks. The sparks are the triggers who can trigger these energies of Tohu, this immense light of Tohu. But on the other hand, the mitzvahs are also in a very orderly, constructed fashion that has a lot of tikkun in it. In other words, we have good vessels, good containers that can facilitate the light. So Torah and mitzvahs is all about a unification of Tohu and tikkun. What does that mean? It means eventually the observance of Torah and mitzvahs lead creation to become to the ultimate aliyah sa'olamas, to the elevation of worlds, to receive the lights of 63. And therefore, by the giving of the Torah, it was done through the horses. Now that level is related to the horse. 63 is what does it do to a horse? Because we learned last week, 63 spells the word gas. And gas means a certain haughtiness, which generally is the antithesis to holiness. Haughtiness is no good. But yet, by the singing when we cross the sea, it says, Ashir al Hashem, we will sing to God, Ki go'oi go, he's greater over the great. He's exalted over the exalted. That means God exhibited God flashes a flashing of his exaltedness. And what does that do? What that makes is that till that time we were in exile. Exile means that the energies of holiness are being misdirected to the klipa. Why are the forces, why is Paro, why is Egypt so powerful, so strong, so much so that they can dominate over the realms of holiness and enslave the Jewish people? And that is because they're stealing energy. They're taking God into exile as well. Because the divine manifestation is of a lower level that is vulnerable to being exiled, vulnerable to being mischanneled. But when the exile ended, God kind of clogged and stuffed the holes. he repaired the leak. How does he repair the leak? Ki ga'oi ga, he reveals himself from an exalted place. He suddenly appears from a transcendental, higher, infinite place where they can't take, where God is very lofty and he's untouchable. They can't reach him. They can't grab onto him. And that's why it says when God lifts himself up, sus veroch v'arama bayam, he casts the horses and the chariots into the sea, which means because he's elevating himself through the energy of horse. God is like riding on a horse, like a warrior, like a very high being, exalted being. God is not coming very humble and whatever. God is presenting himself on a horse, which we spoke last week that one of the characteristics of a horse is that a horse has pride. That's why it's we said it's the pride of the horse has to do with the source of the horse from Bina, where there is this exaltation. And that's what elevates. And over there can't be exile. There's no exile over there. There's safety. So that was when we went out of Egypt. But the ultimate state of manifesting these lights of Tohu in its fullest manifestation is only going to be when Mashiach comes in the third temple. Mm-hmm. In order to get there, in order to get to the Gilui of Bina, of Alma Dechera, in order to get to this Aliyah Sa'olamais, in order to get to this Klipa-free zone, in this very, very, very lofty state, we need to first prepare the vessels. Because what happens is the worlds rise up. In order to rise, they need to separate. They need to separate from the klipa down here. In other words, there has to be an extraction of sparks. Because to trigger the lights of Tohu, to draw down, the lights of Tohu has withdrawn back into itself, back into Hashem, into its source. To trigger them, you have to bring them a little piece, a little shard, a little speck of which was once from the world of Tohu. In other words, that's always the way things work. When you trigger something by giving it of its kind. So these sparks from this lofty world of Tohu, as a result of the Shviras HaKelim. Now, this is something that he made mention, which I'm not going to explain now, but just mention that in Tohu itself, it's the seven midos that collapsed. The main element of Tohu, which is the three intellectual aspects of Tohu, Bina primarily of Tohu, never collapsed. Because on the level of Bina, there can't be a collapsing. There can't be a fall. There can't be a shattering. On the lower emotions, there could be. But we use these emotions that collapsed, we use them as triggers to trigger the realm of Tohu. But where are these sparks? These sparks are currently, until we reconnect them and until we can create Aliyah Sa'olamas. So it's like in order to trigger the lights of Tohu and to reveal that in the world, so that to make the world's fully holy proof, and that klipa and the unholy can never get into it, which is going to be eternally a godly place. We will never be able to sin anymore. We will never be able to fall anymore. So in order to create that, we need to go down to very dark places first. Because the only way to access those lights is to go down to mine for the sparks. Now, spark mining is very dangerous. Because spark mining involves that you're going into a place where the klippas are very strong. And what can happen is, instead of you swallowing the klippa can swallow you. It's exactly like Pac-Man. So when the Pac-Man game goes, you wanted to eat the monsters. So you're running to eat the monsters, right? Remember the Pac-Man game? You're running to eat the monster, but the monster can eat you too. Then you're out. So the question is, who's going to eat you? You're going to eat the monster's going to eat you. So you got all these little monsters running around and you're going down there. So how do you make sure that you eat the monster can't eat you? So you have to swallow something first. There are these things in the game. You grab that thing, and for the next 30 seconds or 60 seconds, I'm not exactly sure how long it was, once you eat that thing, it kind of puts something in you that you become monster proof. And not only can the monster not eat you, but you can eat the monster. That's the way Pac-Man works. And I'm just finding that there's a very deep chassidus over here. What he's saying over here is, in the Maimer, even before we enter into the ultimate world of Bina, which the horses are going to take us to, those are the horses that are racing upward. The sparks of Bina, when they are carrying the world with it higher and higher to the ultimate lights of Toh, that's through the horse. Remember, we said that in the word sus, it's 2 times 63, because it's 63 in a level of ascending to 63 and descending from 63. So we just explained what is the ascending. The ascending is the ultimate state, when the worlds have already been elevated, they've already been purified, when we've ascended into a state where we can experience this enormous godly revelation without our vessel shattering. And that's the ultimate state. But in order to get there, we have to work with the creation when the creation is still low, when the creation is still under the spell of the tree of knowledge, where there is a mixture of good and bad. And over there is where we have to do the work, but it's too dangerous to go down there. That's the thing. So you need to get yourself garments from the world of Bina. Bina can give us the garments. Bina can give us that protection. We need to swallow a Bina pill so that we can, once we have it, we can go down low, low, low. And since Bina itself is a world of freedom, a world where Klippa cannot attack, where Klippa cannot hack, it's for that very reason that the Bina energy, when it descends with us, even though we're not in the Bina zone, we're going far, we're going down into the realm of Ban in 52, where there's a shattered vessels, where the Klippa reigns supreme, where there's Klippas Noga, where there is an enormous amount, and even the 3 impure Klippas, there's an enormous amount of Chazarai, of dangerous stuff that are all over the place, lurking and trying to latch themselves open, steal holiness, steal Kedusha, which is through sin and all the like. So how do you go down there into a dark world and remain connected and not, God forbid, fall into sin and to all kinds of other unholy situations? Which, if God forbid that happens, then instead of holiness extracting the spark, more powers of the holy have fall victim to the Klippa. The Klippa has now swallowed and internalized so much more godly energy and become enriched. So it's a tug of war. How do you make sure? You need to have special protection. And that's the other horse. The horses, as we learned last week, is the empowerment coming from Bina, but they're going down. Down meaning they are descending together with the person. The person is from the world of Tikkun. Our souls is from the world of Tikkun. But we are empowered with energies from higher, from Bina. And he explained what that means in a very interesting discussion, that the emotions themselves, where the war is really within the emotions. 7 holy emotions have to battle with the 7 unholy emotions. That's the main battlefield. But you can't enter the fight only empowered by holy emotions. You need to bring along with you energies from your mind. You need to bring your mind along. You have to bring intelligence into it. You can't just fight impure love with holy love. You have to also have holy intelligence. And that's the powers of Bina. And last week, if you remember, at the end of the class, we learned that's the meaning of the mother bird over the little chicks. The mother is that means we bring down the lights of Bina. If you remember last week, we discussed that that's the idea of Sfira to Omer, that in order to purify the 7 emotions, which is a certain element of this is the idea of extracting the good potential in our animal soul, in our unholy emotions, and extracting the good potential and elevating it. In order for us to elevate it, we need the mimachras hashabas. We can't derive and be successful just from our emotions. In other words, if we might think that if I have a strong love of Hashem and fear of God and so forth and so on, I'm ready to go into darkness. No. You never know. Those emotions can become very quickly not only overwhelmed by the unholy emotions coming from the part of ourselves that have not yet been rectified, But even more than that, the energies of these emotions themselves can become allies to the unholy. You can start loving a sin with the intensity of your godly soul, which is really bad. Because it's one thing to love and to have a lust or a desire to do an avera, a sin, from your animal soul. It's a whole other story when a person, God forbid, brings in their godly soul into that pursuit. That is no good. But if we want to battle the battle just from our emotions, it's too dangerous. You could win, but you could lose as well. So you need to bring in intellect. As last week I discussed, that's why it's Chabad that goes across the entire world into all the dark places. Chabad Hasidim, because Chabad Hasidim gives us access to Bina energy. Hasidus is coming from Bina, it's coming from Chachma Bina, it's coming from the Mochin. It gives us the ability to go out far and not be persuaded by the unholy environments, whichever place in the world. Remain strong, and then and even more than just unbudgeable and remain observant and connected to God, but more than that, to transform that very, very godless environment into a godly place. Like we see across the entire world, so many Chabad houses sprung out everywhere, and it's transformed so many communities and places. It's far across the world. Why? That's only the power of Chabad, of Mochin, and that's the horse, because the horse is from Bina. And again, the pride of it is that when it goes down, it can remain above a situation even though it goes down. That's why we can extract the spark. We learned that emotions get too caught up. And we discussed it in relationships as well. That when you're dealing with a difficult situation, usually family members are really not good in dealing with, if there's a certain person in the family or a certain issue in the family where a person needs some help emotionally, usually family members are not the right people to help in these situations, because what happens is a family member gets involved also from an emotional place, and even if their intentions are so good, because their emotions are there, they get all rallied up and emotions get caught up, then what can happen is the opposite. This misguided emotion or misguided a person in the family that's having a trouble with their emotions can actually drag the other individual in as well into that, entangle them up, and then use that very energy to further deprave themselves. So it's always helpful to get someone who can enter into the place from a objective state, which is purely intelligence, purely mind, not through emotion. And with that calmness, they're able to enter intricately into the dark space in which we need to fix, but in a way where they remain unfazed and unmoved, because they're not there emotionally, they're there intellectually. And intellect can hover above the darkness. It doesn't get swallowed. It doesn't get caught up. That's the beauty of intellect. And that's the quality of Torah. Torah deals with all the dark elements in the world, the 7 unholy emotions, goes through all the corridors of the world, deals with every situation, but is not emotional about it. It's from a very clear, godly, instructive place, saying kosher, not kosher, good, not good. It's like your GPS doesn't get emotionally caught up in the directions. Couples used to drive a lot, and they used to get into big fights in driving. I told you to turn over here, go over here. God helped the Shalom Shalom Bayis by giving us GPS systems, because the wife doesn't have to tell the husband, go here, go there. He can drive. And even if, and see what happens to the GPS is, if you make a wrong turn, it doesn't get riled up, it doesn't get all angry, it doesn't get all upset. How come you didn't listen? What's with you? What are you, mazel? Now we're stuck in traffic. It just reroutes calmly. So it remains, and that's how it can fix the problem. Because once emotions start flying, forget about it. I told you, you told me, I thought so. No, before you know it, no good. That's the beauty of a cold GPS. It never gets excited. So and that's what's necessary in our fixing of the world. We have to have that aloofness, the aloofness of the mind, the aloofness. So this is the second element of the bird. The bird, no wait, that's the first, that's the mother bird coming down to be over the chicks. I mean, that's representing Bina energy coming down into this world to help, while the world is not ready yet to receive godly light, but to help do the rectification, to help separate right from wrong, help extract the spark, and help the extractor not fall prey to the monsters that are in the extracting territory. Once that is achieved, now we hop onto the other horse, which is the horse now riding up, which means we do the mitzvah, we achieve the extraction. Through the doing of the mitzvah, we elevate the spark. And then what happens? The physical object with which we do the mitzvah is now rising and rising, and we don't feel it yet, but it's really capable of it. When we will pray, it will rise to a higher level. And then when Shabbos will come, the mitzvah that we did during the week, which was already elevated in our prayer, will receive a super boost, a higher elevation. That physical space with which we did the mitzvah is now being elevated to receive the lights of Tohu, which it reveals itself on Shabbos to a certain degree. And the ultimate elevation is when all the Shabboses together will all be elevated in the day of Shabbos. You realize? So what happens when you're doing a mitzvah is, when you're doing a mitzvah separating good from bad, and the spark starts like a red light, beep, 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 the spark starts, it is now visible. Not to my eyes, not to your eyes, but to Hashem's eyes. And to tzaddikim, they can see a spark now kind of liberated already. It's at this moment already, it's already connected. But we know it says that through prayer, it receives all the Torah and the mitzvot that we do are upgraded. In other words, in the prayer, they're elevated even higher. Because it's a time of elevation of the worlds. That the mitzvah you did 2 o'clock in the afternoon is elevated 6 o'clock by mincha to a higher state. But as high as it can go during the week, that's the Shabbos of the week. Prayer is the Shabbos of the week. It waits till Shabbos. And Shabbos, it enters the elevator of Shabbos, and it's elevated way, 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 way higher. And it's kind of already receiving much more moichin, lights of the moichin. But it's still far from Mashiach yet. And then all the stuff that were elevated in the individual Shabbos ultimately gain their elevation in the 7th millennia, when the day will be completely Shabbos, where all the world will rise up for its ultimate elevation into the manifestation of Bina light. We will be in the Jubilee year. There won't be any possibility for Klippa. We will be fully manifesting godliness. So that's the second horse. The horse that is rising and lifting up into the world of Bina, as opposed to the empowerment of the element of the horse. That's why we said when Mashiach comes, we're going to experience the true moichin. Now our experience of God is mostly midos, is emotion. That's why Israel is only a land of 7 nations. But when Mashiach comes, we're going to have the land of 10 nations, because God is going to screw on the head. I mean, cosmically, the head is going to, the intellect, the divine intelligence, which is higher than creation, is going to be revealed to creation. And when that happens, there is no possibility anymore of falling backwards. Ever, ever, ever again. And that's also, now let's go back, that's the second idea where it says, send away the mother bird. First, the mother bird is helping you out during the darkness, during the time of the struggle. Send away the mother bird, meaning elevate Bina back to its place. Vesabanim and its children, which means the Torah and the mitzvot that you did, with the physical, with these sparks of holiness, tikach lach, take for yourself, meaning now they are fully integrated and fully a station of holiness and of godliness. They're fully vessels for Hashem to dwell in. And that is called the completion of Tikkun HaKelim. The vessels have become now rectified to receive the lights. And remember what we learned in the beginning of the discourse. The whole meaning of Nasa v'Nishma, we will do and we will hear, is that once we have rectified vessels, then we can draw. V'Nishma means we will gather in the infinite light. Because remember we said that God is compared to a fire. Now I'm going back to what we really learned at the beginning of the discourse. God is compared to a fire. And just like a fire does not is not burning unless there is substance that it can consume and burn, or else the fire is abstract, invisible. There is fire, but it's not even bright because it's unknown to us. It's just a very, very unseen gas or whatever it is that is not in any way real to us because it's outside of our experience. But when we have we have wood, we have matches, we have oil, we have whatever it needs, we can then draw the fire down. But you have to first. So I would say something like this. This is like if you're in a place you want to create a fire, you go camping. Okay, you go outdoors, you want to create a fire. So now you need the materials to make a fire. And now it's been raining a lot in California, so it's going to be pretty hard if you go out in the forest and you try to look for dry wood because everything is wet. That means the kalim, the vessels, are not ready because they're still mixed with water. So if you can take these vessels and the vessels in this case would be the wood, and you take it and you dry it up in the sun or whatever, and you get it ready, and then you can use this. So that's what we're busy doing. We're busy drying the vessels from the waters of the klipa. I'm using another example. So once you have the dry firewood, then you can draw the fire down. The fire down is the revelation of the infinite, which is the whole purpose of creation. God should move down into this world. So Torah and mitzvahs enable and prepare the world and do the tikkun of the kalim in order to allow. Now, even before the Torah were given, so it seems like in the mimer, in the discourse, it seems like something like this. This power of tikkun HaKelim comes in stages. First, there needed to be a level of tikkun HaKelim even before the Torah was even given. In order that the Torah should even be given to the world, there had to be some rectification of the vessels. Initially, the vessels meaning the physical world was so messed up that it wasn't even Torah, it wasn't even ready for us to start doing mitzvahs with. We couldn't even apply the Torah, which is going to act as the rectifier. Even that was not yet ready. So we needed 2,500 years of preparation. That preparation involved both divine intervention, the flood, and other things that God, the flood especially, was a great purification. And then primarily it was the work of our patriarchs and matriarchs with their enormous self-sacrifice and devotion, and Abraham passed all the 10 tests, and their level of service purified the world in such an enormous way. But they didn't have the mitzvahs yet. They couldn't do it, and therefore they couldn't extract the sparks from Tohu. So we learned that even though they connected, it was a weaker connection. But at least the fact that they were connecting was having impact on the rest of the world, on the rest of the globe. It was purifying the vessels. You couldn't extract the spark, but at least they created an advancement in the vessels. At least they advanced the world. And the next stage, which accelerated the process, was the 210-year exile of immense battering of the Jewish bodies. Basically, the Jewish people took it for the rest of the world. The beating up of the Jewish bodies, the suffering, the immeasurable pain and suffering of the enslavement, and all the horrors that went along with it, because it was done to them while the souls were in bodies, and the bodies are part of the physical world. The physical world was purified and purified and purified. That's why when Mashiach will come, the rest of the people will really, really, really thank the Jewish people, because we really, really took it for we took it for the whole team. That's the truth. Egypt is called the sweltering oven. It was an oven. It was a burning fire. We were in a hellish fire for 200 years, and as a result of the pain and suffering that was happening, it was shattering the klipas in the world. It was breaking the unholy, preparing the world to be even able to receive the Torah, which the Torah is going to act for the next 3,500 years. The Torah is going to really be applied and extract the sparks of holiness, the good potential, clean the klipas. remove the clip of the shells, extract the potential that's in the world, and prepare the world for the ultimate revelation in Mashiach's times. You see, it's all a rectification. And then the ultimate rectification of the vessels is when Mashiach is here, when the whole world is ready. So when we talk about rectification of vessels, it's a whole long process. It begins right at the beginning of time, and it goes through the entire history. It's all a process of this rectification of the vessel. But we understand by the giving of the Torah, there was already an enormous progress made that the physical world was able to receive the Torah already. And the moment you do a mitzvah with something, you've kind of already completed the rectification of this vessel, and we move on to another piece of the world. In other words, you rectified this dollar bill, but when you give the next dollar bill for tzedakah, then the next dollar bill has been rectified. Yesterday's lunch you elevated in today's mitzvah. Today's lunch you're going to elevate in tomorrow's mitzvah. When you're doing God's will, you're elevating it, and these vessels are becoming, like the Alter Rebbe is saying in Tanya, we're learning it these days. How klipas noga, bit by bit, the more energy, physical energy you put into a mitzvah, he says, because you're taking your food that you eat and everything, and you're putting it into the mitzvah, all that is being elevated. As we once had a whole long discussion, how, not once, more than once, that all the food that we eat, it has a whole history behind it. So you're eating one potato, and you're making a blessing on that potato. It's burning out over here. You're making yeah, it's only at 5%. Why is this not working? Maybe I failed to turn this on. Oh, it should be on. Oh, that's it. It was. So this is the idea of the what was I saying? What was the last thing we were talking about? This is the idea of the Torah was given, so now the vessels are going back up. Okay. Now the vessels are in a state where they can start to be rectified. So now where does Purim come in here? Purim was another phase in the Torah's integration into the world. So it's interesting. The title of these two classes is this week and last week is the rectification of the vessels. That's the title of the class, because that's the main theme. The first week, class, and I call this class rectification of the vessels number 3. But really, if you look on YouTube, you'll see that I only have one class. I have part 2 and where's part 1? Because part 1 had a different title. It was called the Torah is integration into the world. So that too is part of the rectification of the vessels. So what happened is like this: by the giving of the Torah, because we went through the Egypt and all that purified us enough to be able to receive the Torah and begin this grueling process of the elevation of all of creation, removing the klipan. But he's now going to explain in today's class that by Purim, because of primarily a collective self-sacrifice of the Jewish people during the story of Purim, on a level that was unmatched in any other time of history, in which the Jewish people stood with a singular commitment to God, not to budge from their Jewishness. Although they were in a very, 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 very dangerous zone, and remaining Jewish and being proudly Jewish was enormously dangerous. It was, God forbid, that they will all be wiped out. And they all stood with a unified heart, with the deepest desire to be connected to God. And that powerful commitment, which was collectively, and being that the Jewish people are considered the soul of creation, when the entire soul, not individuals, but every single one of them stood in a state of willing to die and not disconnect from God, that had, and they were willing to die physically. So that purified the physical world, accelerated the purification to an enormous state. And as a result of that, the infinite light, the Torah, which is coming down in them and through them into the world, was able to register much deeper inside of them, was able to etch itself much deeper into the Jewish people. We received it with a much better reception. As opposed to earlier, it was there, but it was, that's what we found, we discussed, and we're going to learn about it inside today. We had moments we were very connected, and then we fell, and then we were very, very wishy-washy before that. Because even though we received the Torah, it didn't really click. But by the story of Purim, it really clicked. Why? Because this was another stage in the rectification of the vessels. This is the idea. For that reason, it's as if it was like a giving of the Torah all over again. So you had to bring out the garment that the king wore, which is the Torah mitzvah is called the garment. And we had to bring the horses out, because that's the whole giving of the Torah is through the horses. It's the drawing of the lights of Bina down, so that later we can elevate the sparks through the mitzvahs and hop onto the other horse who's racing up, where the Bina, in other words, the horse is two functions. It's the ultimate destination of where the mitzvah takes you. It's also the ability to do the mitzvah. For godliness to come down so low is through the energies of Bina, which is this horse from 63, from the energies of 63. Okay, this is the synopsis of what we learned last week. So now we're going to learn the parentheses. I didn't understand so much this parenthesis. I hope now that I rechewed it and rehashed all this and we discussed it, maybe it's going to lighten up. It's going to light up in my head. Also the meaning that let's go back to just a few lines before that. V'chein bepurim. You see in between the two parentheses on the second column, it's like one parenthesis ended and the other one didn't start yet, okay? V'chein bepurim nema. This we learned already. There's just these few words. And Purim it also says, Lavush malchus. The sus hasharacham. It says the garment of kingship and the horse that the king was riding. Lavush malchus, haina lavushim. The lavush of malchus, these are the garments, hanasim and masa mitzvahs. These are the final product. After we do a mitzvah, that creates a garment for God to manifest himself. It's also a garment for our soul to be able to receive the infinite light. Which they are from after we elevate the sparks and we separate the good from the bad from the klipa called noga. Noga is the mixed shell, which most of the world is made out of, in which it has potential for goodness. So if we use it the right way and especially through mitzvahs, we extract the spark from the unholy shell. So, and that creates this garment. But so it seems like, according to this, the garment is the ultimate product. But in order to be able to do that, to have these, to be able to produce these garments, and as we said earlier, in order to go down so low, where you get the materials to make the garment, which those materials are are infiltrated, or rather, I should say, they're in the territory of a lot of klipa, where in order to go down there is very dangerous. So you need to have powers that will help the person. That's what we said. We need to have the horse. That's what he says. And how do you have that garment? How do you have the final product? How can you get that garment? That's through the horse that's riding, which the horse is the power of Bina, that from a very lofty place that protects. The Gam, now he adds in the parentheses, Gam also that which the king wears, it seems like the pirush that he's saying now is that the lavush, the garment, is not in the first explanation of how he explained when Haman says, bring the garment and bring the horse. So the garment is the final product. How you're going to get the garment means the outcome of a mitzvah. But how are you going to get that garment? Through the horse. So even though Haman says the horse later, the horse is, how will you achieve the garment? Through the horse. Like he said earlier, that before Shavuos, when you receive the Torah and we actually produce garments, you need to do Sfiras HaOmer. You need to first do the purification, which for that you need the horses. You need to take from Bina Mimachras HaShabbos. So the horse is still before Shavuos. You're very actively taking physical objects because you have the Torah already. You're able to connect physicality to be a facilitator of godliness. But before that, you need to do a Biur. You need to do a separation between good and bad. And that comes through Sfiras HaOmer, which happens 7 weeks before Shavuos. So in our case, Lavush Malchus is the final garment which is ready to facilitate Hashem. But the horses are the lights of Torah that are empowering us to be able to descend and do mitzvahs. Fine. What's not so geschmack in that pirush, where it seems that could be the reason why he's now giving another interpretation, is because of that, it's working in the reverse order. First the lavush, but the lavush is really later. The garment is really later, and first is the horse. But Haman is saying, how will you get to the garment? You'll get to it through the sus. But now he wants to say no, according to the second interpretation. That could, another way of learning it, both are true, but this is another way of learning it, is that the garment and the horse are both serving the same function. What is that? The main power of the Biur, the main extraction of the unholy emotions. How do you elevate unholy emotions? Sparks of holiness that are embedded in unholy emotions. It's only elevated through an emotion. In other words, when I have an excitement, a simple example. We have all kinds of excitements from our animal soul. Being a human and enclosed in a body, in a physical world that is full of enticing things. So we have all kinds of animalistic cravings and desires. Fine. Passions, not good, not holy. A lot of them sinful. All kinds of stuff. Make up a human psyche. Dark stuff. Fine. When a person eats, food is fuel. Food is fuel. The most likely outcome of physical food is that when you'll eat this food, the food is going to add blood. Added blood is going to create more passion. The animal side of the human being will become more passionately, its emotions, its attachments, its unholy emotion of passion, of desire, of want is only going to grow. That would be the likely, without introducing mindfulness, without introducing godliness, the more we engage in the material physical world, the more it festers, the more it feeds into unholy emotions. Okay. How do you extract that spark? How do you take the spark of the food? The food has within it, because the food also contains within it sparks from the broken emotions. Everything has emotions in it, divine emotion. How do you extract that spark, which is most likely to go into an unholy place and direct it toward holiness? If you can eat that food and then steer that excitement into a holiest excitement. For example, after you ate, you activated your soul and you experience an excitement, a holy fervor, an excitement to pray, to connect, to do a favor to another person, to do goodness. And you take that energy and that energy becomes the energy of love or excitement that you have towards God has now included the food that you've eaten, which means the energy you got out of the food, that blood went into the mitzvah. So the emotion extracted the emotion. Only the emotion can extract the emotion, because what's broken in our emotions. So only emotions can extract. However, even though it's the emotion of love that extracts the spark of holiness, as we discussed, so and in Kabbalah, that means that the Ze'er Anpin, the 6 emotions of Kedusha, are going down to collect the sparks of holiness that are embedded in the unholy man and extracting it. So with the emotion, you extract it. But again, as we discussed earlier, the emotions are too dangerous to allow them to go in alone. If you don't have any Torah knowledge in your head and you just want to rely on your natural disposition of your godly soul to love God and to activate itself, despite the fact that it's being served, I don't know, chicken and potatoes and rice, which has nothing spiritual to them, are more likely to lean someone towards the physical, and you're just relying that your natural disposition of godly love that you have to God is automatically going to grab all that energies into holiness, it's usually wishful thinking. It's probably not going to happen. The emotions alone can't handle it. That's what we discussed earlier. So what did we say we need? We need a protection coming from the Bina, from a higher place. That's what we learned. And that serves as garments to the 6 emotions. The 6 emotions are like the structure of a human being. In a human being, the chesed is the right hand, the gevura is the left hand, the torso is the teferet, the compassion, the right leg is the netzach, the left leg is the hod. Right? So you have the 6 yesod is the reproductive element within the person. So you have the chesed, gevura, teferet, netzach, hod, yesod, that's the body. But then you need a garment. Because if you're going to let your body go in there with unclothed, it's going to get burnt. You need, just like a fireman goes into a dangerous place, he needs special garments, protective gear, protective firewear. An astronaut goes into an intense zone, it needs to wear a spacesuit. A diver going into an intense diving place, going into the sea, into deep diving, needs special diving clothing. Every time you go into a very intense environment, you need special shield. So the emotions of holiness need to be garbed with the Bina garments. Bina provides, in Kabbalah, that's called the Chashmal. Chashmal is a garment that Bina, and Chashmal is electricity. Chashmal is a garment that it says in Kabbalah that there is a certain garment coming from Bina to garb her child, her son, the sphero, the Ze'er Anpin, so that when it goes down, it's not damaged. Now that garment, but didn't we say that's horses? Didn't we say earlier that's what the horse provides? Yeah. So he's going to explain now. There's 2 parts to that garment. The garment for the entire body is called a garment. At the bottom, you need more than just regular garments. Garments, you need shoes. Like everybody knows, you go into any deep, dark, you go into a danger zone for a fireman, for instance, they need to have special, but one of their most heaviest garment is their boots. The boots is like one of the most important and for a diver, the flippers and it's made out of the toughest material, and the rest of the stuff is softer. But the flippers that they wear, or the guy, a fireman, wear heavy fire boots. I don't know what kind of astronauts, what their feet element is made out of. Maybe it's the heavy part that keeps them grounded. I'm not exactly sure. But in most garments that you're wearing for protection, the part that's most vulnerable are the soles of the feet. So they need not only a special garment, but even a tougher garment. So Bina provides the garment for the Ze'er Anpin on 2 levels. For the entire body, it's a regular garment, and for the feet, it's shoe, with those shoes are called the horses. That's why the verse says, since the Torah is the descent of the Ze'er Anpin, it's the descent of the divine emotions coming down. That's what the 6 orders of the Mishnah are. It's the 6 divine emotions which are coming into the world. But we don't want those divine emotions to become corrupted, God forbid. It needs a garment. So Bina provides that garment. And that is by the giving of the Torah, it says, and by Purim, Yavu levush malchus. First the garment, and then a horse. So according to this, the garment is not the finished product after you did the mitzvah. The garment comes before the horse. It's all the preparatory stages of Bina light descending to protect the emotions in order to be able to go down. That's his Biur over here. V'gam, that's the second explanation. Shalovash by Hamelech, that the king wore, who Inyan, it's similar to the concept of a chashmal de bina, of the concept of chashmal of bina, hamalbush, that enclosed lezun, which is zuchra v'nuk from the male and female, mitzdadeim from their sides. The Hinei and but it's not enough to protect them from their sides. Hinei lamata, below nasa minol, it becomes a shoe, tachas raglei, and beneath their feet. Who's there? The male and female of Atzilus, the masculine and feminine element of Atzilus, the Malchut and the 6 emotions. Together they go down to fix the world. You can say Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah, is the Ze'er Anpin, and Torah Shebal Peh, the oral Torah, that's the Malchut. Both of them go down, but they have a chashmal and a horse. The chashmal. Once they have a chashmal and a horse, no one is messing with them. That's the point. And that chashmal and the horse is coming from Bina, from 63. It's coming from above. And this is the concept, the idea of the shoe, that's similar to the idea of the horse. And he doesn't give an explanation what the relation of a horse to a shoe is. I don't know. Stated elsewhere, a hefresh, the difference being sus lekruv. Now, it's stated elsewhere, there's a difference between a horse and a cherub. Now, it seems like cherubs are also something that are rideable. We don't really have cherubs in the physical world. Cherubs are something that you have in the temple. You had cherubs on the ark. And we all know that when there's the description of the angels above, it describes cherubs, keruvim. But we don't have such a creature down here in the world that's a cherub. You didn't go to a zoo ever and see a cherub. They don't exist in this planet. I don't know why. Everything in the spiritual world has a kind of a thing. The lion in the chariot, there's a lion down here. The ox in the chariot, there's an ox. The eagle exists. Why the cherubs are not something that have a physical thing, I don't know. However, it is a spiritual entity, and just like there are spiritual horses that serve to that the Shekhinah can come riding down on the horse. It's the cherubs also serve as a vehicle. But where do we see that? The Talmud tells us that Hashem is riding every night on a cherub, and he rides through what does it say? 18,000 worlds. He's riding every night. What does he do at night? He's riding on his cherub. So you see that God rides on horses. He's riding on cherubs. So he's explaining over here what's the difference between the horse and the cherub. They're both letters. It's just that the horses are much higher, because horses are vehicles that are carrying the energy from a much higher place. They are letters, divine speech letters, but they're letters of the mind, not letters of the emotions. And that's why they're called the letters of the Soviv Kalam. They're the letters of 63, not the letters of 45. The cherubs are the letters of 45. It's like in a human being, our thoughts are letters, right? Our thoughts are language. Now, there's two types of thought. When you're thinking a little deeper, you're using your mind. You're creating thought, and in your thought is embedded your stream of consciousness, which is your thought, is facilitating and hosting deep intelligence, intellect. But then there are times when the thought is not serving the mind, it's serving the heart. That's when you're kind of not concentrating, you're just feeling emotions, and your thoughts are filled with emotional energy. Positive emotions, negative emotions, but it's emotions that are dominating the thought. So emotions are considered internalized lights, and intellect, like we said earlier, is considered encompassing lights. So by God, it's the same thing. When God is riding on horses, the horses are vehicles for God's intelligence. By the giving of the Torah, God was giving us his intelligence. He was sharing his mind. He was sharing his transcendental light. And that's called Soviv Kalal. And we will understand based on this. The sus oisi from shachas the bina. That sus are the letters and the flow from the transcendental place of bina, lahakif, to encompass and to protect, gamal davar asanui. So, and more than that, it enables us to go down even to a very, very hate, to a place that is despised, that God despises, a place that is impure. And like we learned last week, your mind is capable of analyzing something that you really, really dislike if you're approaching it intellectually. But if you're approaching it emotionally, you can't emotionally invest yourself in something that you hate because it's too painful. You can't do it. The intellect, because the intellect remains aloof, it's able to go. So that's what it's able to go even to dark places. And these are the letters and the flows of these makifim energies, which is the encompassing lights, the magic of the Torah. And it is able to, the Torah is so high and so beautiful, it can discuss even the most horrific and dark and even despicable or disgusting situations. Torah discusses it. And the Torah has an opinion on it. And the Torah purifies and does a surgery in all these aspects. Like we discussed last week, that the rabbis had to be fluent and knowledgeable in all the means of of idolatry, even though it's the most disgusting thing. But they had to know it well. But they knew it in a way that they remained aloof from it. It didn't bother them. It didn't, because they were just they were disconnected while they were studying it. But that's the horse, but the cherub, these are the letters of the encompassing lights. Of the indwelling light, of the filling light. These are the flow of when the midos are coming down outward, they're coming through letters. That's what it is. Why you have to bring that over here? Maybe just to prove this idea. Like it's explained elsewhere, so you see from here that the horse represents the drawing down of bina lights. Okay. But also to understand more. According to what we learned now, is that the horse, the reason why we need Sovev Kalalman, the reason why we need encompassing energies, these higher level of letters, the horses versus the cherubs, the reason why, in order to implement the Torah to the world, we need the powers of intelligence, which are called encompassing energies, versus the emotions that actually do the extraction. But we learned you need that. Why? Primarily to protect the extractor, as we said earlier. Because if you get too emotionally, since emotions get too involved, two things can happen. Number one, they can lose their compass completely and get dragged into the darkness. And secondly, they're afraid to go into the darkness. Because they can get crushed. So that's why you need to have the empowerment from Soviv just to help and to assist this extraction and bringing about the extraction. Now he's going to give another reason why really the only way to really extract sparks, a deeper reason, is only through the transcendental light. Not only because it's too dangerous for the indwelling light. The indwelling light could be converted to the unholy, and only the super light is able to remain aloof and untouched and unfazed and empower the extraction. But also for another reason. As he says, like it's explained elsewhere in a different mimer, that we learned this discourse this past summer. Pashas Pinchas, this past summer, we learned the explanation on that discourse, which was this idea why tshuva is only effective in this world. We know that when we're alive, we can do tshuva in a minute. But once a soul leaves this world and it wants to, it's very stuck in a certain level. And if it's going to achieve a change, it's going to be a very slow process. It's going to have to move slowly, level through level through level through level through level until it can Go very bit by bit. Literally, it's the most painful journey. I mean, painful. It's a very in our world, you can change yourself in a minute, from the depths of depravity to the peaks of holiness. Tshuva is like an instantaneous. Why? So we explain, Mishum, the Davka ba'olam hazeh meiram is gala b'chinasei v'kolam. We had a whole discussion that initially when God created the world, the process of creation itself already brought about a purification and a separation of the sparks, brought about a cleansing, and that power to do so is only from the encompassing lights. So therefore, he says the upper worlds, once they were already finished, they were already, meaning they're sorted out, the holy from the unholy is sorted out, and holiness and unholy don't exist together. Each one is in their own space. In the spiritual world, you probably remember this discussion. It was an amazing mimer. So we learned how the holy and the holy, each one inhabit different zones. So once something is finished in its purification, the power of the Sovev, of the encompassing light, of the encompassing light, of the infinite light, is no more active there. Because now the place becomes a vessel, and once it's a vessel, it's ready for the indwelling light, for the internalized light, not the encompassing light. Our world, we learned, is the last world that wasn't fixed yet. Since it's still a mishmash, our world is the only place that the power of the fix is still here, which we learned in that discourse, is the Sovev Kalalman. And Sovev Kalalman, the encompassing light, is omnipotent, it's infinite, so it can in an instant take from, which equalizes the highest and the lowest, and therefore it can take from 1 second from the lowest place to the highest place. It's an enormous potent power that's only available in this world. So from that discussion over there, you can see this idea. As he says, the power to do this Biur is dafke here. Leo says hapcha, to take something from a complete unholy state and flip it over into holiness, is only in the power of this omnipotent power of the omnipotency of God, which is the infinite power, which is only in this world. So according to this, we need it not just so that we won't be affected while we're doing the Biur, but the Biur itself, the rectification itself, needs a power of Sovev Kalam. Where did God transmit to us the power of Sovev Kalam and the encompassing lights? In the Torah. And that's the horses of the giving of the Torah. That's the horse element. Because the horse elements, as we said before, they're letters, they're osios. Whatever letter is a flow, is a carrier, is what transmits. Through words, you transmit things. So what is the couriers? Who are the ones that are carrying transcendental encompassing lights? That's horses. That's through the horse. Over there we learned about male horses and female horses, and therefore bebina, Ushem avaya b'nikod elokim, shuneged beis b'chinas anal. That's why in bina you have the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, but it is with the nikod of elokim. What does that mean? You ever notice in the Siddur, usually there's two names of God. One is Elokim, which we pronounce Elokim, and another one is Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which we're now allowed to say its pronunciation. Instead, we refer to it as Adoi, right? We say the other name of Hashem, what we call Shem Adna. Okay, that's the way we say Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. Sometimes in the Siddur you find that you say you see it written Yud Kei Vav Kei, but you pronounce it Elokim. And that is, how do you know? It's not just in Tehillim; it's found in Tanakh. I don't think it's ever in Chumash, but it's in Navi in quite a few places. You can tell that it has the Yud Kei Vav Kei looks different because it has complete different vowelizations. It's the same vowels of the name Elokim. I think it has a segol at the beginning. The Yud has a segol underneath it, which from and the Yud has a cholam on the top from Elo, and then there is a chirik on the bottom of the Hey, Yud Kei, on the bottom of the Vav. something like that. That's the nikud. And when you see that, you know that even though it's stated Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's pronounced Elokim. It's kind of a hybrid between Havaya and Elokim. He says, whenever you see that, it's a special Yud Kei Vav Kei. Usually Yud Kei Vav Kei is referencing or connecting to the energies of Tiferes, which is the Ze'er Anpin. Remember we said Chesed is the right hand, Gevur is the left, Tiferes is the torso, so it's the main part of the body of the Ze'er Anpin. So usually Yud Kei Vav Kei is in Tiferes. When you see Yud Kei Vav Kei, however, and it's pronounced Elokim, it's in Bina, it's in a higher place. In other words, when you're saying that name of God, you're downloading Bina. You're not downloading the regular download of Yud Kei Vav. So he says, why is Bina a hybrid of Havaya and Elokim? But since we said now that from Bina, which is the word sus, but Bina is associated with horse, we said it is 2 times 63, 2 times Samach Gimel. One of them is the horses going up, and the other one is horses going down. So the horses ascending are the name of Elokim, because the name of Elokim is ascending light. And the horses going down is the name Havaya. So in Bina, there's 2 powers, the power of Hala, the power of going up, and the power of Amshacha, the power of drawing down. That's why in Bina, there is the hybrid of Havaya and together with Shem Elokim. Referencing these 2 powers of the horse, male horses and female horses, these 2 energies, an upward element. I think that's what it means. I think that's what he means in this last line. This occurred to me right now as I'm teaching. Earlier in the day, when I looked at it, I couldn't figure this out. But this is what occurred to me now, so hopefully this is the right pirush. Okay. V'zahu Inyan. So this was the Kabbalistic part that we had to still finish. Now it gets much smoother and easier to learn. V'zeh Inyan. And now we're done with the horses. Once we understand, now he's going to go back to the general subject to explain to us that why by Purim, why was it again a reenactment of the giving of the Torah? Well, what does it do with Purim? Why? Okay, just described it. In order for the Torah to be given, you need to bring down this enormous power that's going to be able to rectify and elevate the sparks of holiness and bring the world to the ultimate aliyah sa'olamais, which is the 2 elements of the horses, the rising upward and descending downward. Okay, but why on Purim? What does it have to do? Why don't we have this element on Hanukkah? Why don't we have it on any other time of the year? What's Purim? So he explains. That's V'zeh Inyan. Now, how do we know Purim? Because the sages tell us that Purim is the conclusion of the giving of the Torah. So if you want to create, there's a set. What's it called again? Shavuot is the beginning of the giving of the Torah. Actually, Yom Kippur is also one part of the giving of the Torah, because the phase 2 of the giving of the Torah, the first luchot were shattered. And we got the second, that's Yom Kippur. And the third holiday related to the giving of the Torah is Purim, because the sages tell us that initially we discussed it a lot this year, Purim, in many of the classes. Initially, it was considered as if the Jewish people were compelled to receive the Torah, because God held them out no there. But on Purim, they did it wholeheartedly. So therefore, and where do the sages know that from? Because it says in the verse, "V'kibel haYehudim." No, the sages actually learn it out from a different place. They learn it out from Kimu v'kiblu haYehudim. Kimu v'kiblu, it says in the Megillah, Kimu v'kiblu, which means they fortified and they accepted haYehudim. The Alter Rebbe, which means they fortified, they validated what they had already received 1,000 years earlier. They finally validated it. They completed their acceptance. But the Alter Rebbe learns it in a different verse as well. What's the second word? A verse where it says, "V'kibel haYehudim," the Jewish people received "Eis asher hechelu lasos," that which they have begun to do. Simply, it means they started establishing Purim. Mordechai and Esther began the process. Now the Jewish people fully accepted it. That's the simple meaning. But the deeper meaning is hechelu doesn't mean they started by the story of Purim, but hechelu, that which they started thousands of years earlier, or by 1,000 years earlier, by the giving of the Torah. Now v'kibel, now they accepted it. So the Alter Rebbe is going to explain what does that mean. V'kibel means they finally clicked. Why? Because you had far more rectification of the vessels ready to receive the Torah. That the Torah can enter much deeper into their souls. And if the Torah registers much deeper into us, we can apply the Torah now more to the world. And it's more effective, our mitzvahs. First of all, we are more consistent in our observance. Secondly, because the Torah finally took hold of us. Oh, last week I was giving the example. Oh, it was a good example. It was the example of that when you try to get a fire burning, a barbecue, sometimes you're pouring kerosene and you're lighting the fire here and you're sticking in a wood match here and a match here. It's catching it, but the coals are not catching. And then finally, it like breaks through and you feel, now the fire got into the coals, they're burning well. So this godly fire of the Torah finally broke through in the Jewish people. Where do we know it from? From V'kibel HaYehudim. So the Alter Rebbe is now going to explain to us beautifully what is the meaning of V'kibel. V'kibel is in the singular. The right word that it should have said is V'kiblu HaYehudim. Yehudim means many Jews, the Jewish people. So in Hebrew, if you want to say the word they accepted, it should say V'kiblu with an extra vav in the end. It says V'kibel as if it's talking about one person. Well, it fits very well, the same like by the giving of the Torah. By the giving of the Torah, it also says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar. The people camped by the mountain. It doesn't say Vayachanu, they camped in the plural. It says Vayichan and he camped, as if it was one person. And the sages say, because by the giving of the Torah, the Jewish people joined, they became so unified that they became one human being. So the same thing happened in Purim. V'kibel. Let's read it inside. And he's also, so again, he's going to first explain the general idea why Purim was the completion of the acceptance. For that, he's going to explain it had to do with the collective self-sacrifice, willingness to die for God, that everybody was part of it. So that's what purified their vessels. So their egos were not in the way. And now they were able, the Torah was able to go into them deeply. It's like the fire was able to catch on to the coals. Then he's going to explain, okay, now that I understand what means V'kibel, they received, and for that, why does it also say in singular, V'kibel, instead of plural, V'kiblu? But it's also going to explain why the Jewish people are, for the first time in Scripture, that the Jewish people are referred to as Yehudim, as opposed to Yisraelim. Our regular name is Yisrael. Why are we suddenly called Yehudim or Hebrews? Why are we suddenly called Yehudim, which means Jews? Why suddenly Jews? By the Purim story, we became Jews. I'm going to say it now. Sometimes when I look at the comments from some, must be beautiful listeners, but they don't like so much when we talk about the Jewish people and so on, for whatever reason. So they like to always refute the classes by saying the Hebrews, so that they can say that it has nothing to do with the Jews. It's the Hebrews. So I'm letting you know that the Hebrews are the Jews. It's the same people. It's the Hebrews and the Jews. And by the Megillah Esther, by the story of Purim, in part of Scripture, it takes all the Hebrews and it turns them into Jews. Because our name is Yehuda. It's just I'm going to say it one time so that all the commenters who like to put those comments over there can know that it's all nothing. It's exactly, you know exactly who we're talking about. Talking about the Jewish people, the Jews that have been persecuted then, persecuted 70 years ago. The anti-Semites still trying to do the same thing today, but it's ridiculous. It's stupid already because, you tried so many times and it didn't work. So at a certain point, you realize it's not going to work because the Jewish people, the Hebrew, what do you want to call them? Hebrew Jews, they're going to be here forever and they're going to bring the world to its ultimate state because that's God's will. And no one is, you can't fight City Hall, you can't fight God. So this is the plan, and it's the Jews, as he's going to explain over here. And the Jews mean exactly the Jews, the people you see on the street wearing kippahs and yarmulkes and stuff like that. Those are the Jews we're talking about. Not some tribe Hebrews that you kind of want to take the whole Torah and put it at the Hebrews. No. Jews were called Hebrews once, they were called Israelites, and by Megillah Esther, for a very deep reason, by the story of Esther, were called Jews. Yehudim. Okay, I had to get that out of my system. Now I'm ready to continue. The Jewish people accepted that which they began to do, Torah, because by the giving of the Torah, they only started to do so. Why? The Kvar Mavul Amailo, we explained earlier, Inyan Nasav and Ishma, we explained earlier that Torah has two parts in it. One part to Torah is the drawing down of the lights, the becoming a communicator, becoming to be able to receive the infinite light shining upon the mitzvah, the person doing the mitzvah, the electricity flow, the godly flow. But we said that means nishma. What the main thing is the nasa. Nasa is to create the vessel to be able to draw that light down. So we learned that nasa, that the primary element is through the first thing is we will do. Why? Because that's the tikkun, that's the rectification. And the purification hakelim of the vessels. And through this, after this, Vinishma, we will hear. What does Vinishma mean? Giluya or, it's the revelation of the lights. The revelation of the lights only happen after we rectify the vessels. And therefore we'll understand, and that's now we'll understand why. By Matan Torah, the vessels were still a little wet. Like the logs were still a little wet. So the fire didn't catch on too well yet. By the giving of the Torah was only the beginning of the rectification of the vessels. First of all, we were just starting off to do mitzvahs. Secondly, all the work that was done before that to rectify the vessel, whether it was the flood, whether it was the purging of the exile of Egypt, and the work of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, all of that was only the beginning of the rectification of the vessels. And because the vessels were only rectified minimally, so the lights, just like you don't get such a good fire when you have wet wood, or semi-wet wood, semi-dry wood. So the drawing of the light was also not as powerful. Inyan, like it says, little by little I will chase the klipa away. We discussed this, that God says, I will chase the nations. When we went into Israel, God says, I will chase the nations away slowly, because if I chase them away too fast, the land will be vacant and the animals will come in. So he's using that idea for over here as well. A little by little, where do we see that it was a slow process? Because we see the Jewish people did not have yet a shleimus, a perfection. Why? Where do we see it? In all the days of the judges, aliyahs v'yeridus, we had ups and downs. We were times that the Jewish people were very, very connected, and times they were, God forbid, pretty disconnected. And also afterwards, that whole period of time. But on the days of Haman, as strange as it was, and that's the tikkun of Haman. And Haman was the one, because of what he tried to do, he brought it up. The Yehudim, the Jewish people received it. Kabbalah Gemura, we completely were able to ingest and take it in completely. Why? What was the magic? Because Haman poked us in our deepest point. He wanted to destroy us completely, and that's the way the Jewish people work. When you provoke them, they rise, and their deepest godly inside emerges ferociously. And that's what happened. Our enormous surrender to God. Through self-sacrifice. What was the self-sacrifice? The sacrifice was that there was a decree that all Jews are going to be murdered in one day, and the Jews had a whole year to look forward to the day that their blood will be spilled by the millions, and not one Jew decided to exit the Jewish camp. Everybody decided to proudly stand by their Jewishness. And the fact that they didn't only do that for a moment, that time to think about it, for an entire year, and no one jumped ship, no one stepped over to the other side, that was unparalleled. And that's what that did, was it accelerated the purification of the vessels. The vessels became, because there's nothing that is more anti-ego than that. Ego is always self-preservation at all costs. So if I need to behave like a non-Jew, I'll do that. I'll need to assimilate to preserve myself. It's the opposite. They surrendered themselves with their bodies, not spiritually, some abstract surrender. It was physically willing to die. And that purified the vessels, betachlis, to the utmost. Now once the vessels are pure, and then the light was able to go much deeper. Suddenly the Jewish people became 1,000,000 times more Jewish, 1,000,000 times more godly. I don't know how many times. I don't know how to measure that, but enormously. The Torah kind of finally was embedded inside of them. And this will also explain why it says Vikibe Loshen Yachid. It says it in the singular. It doesn't say Vikibelu, they. Why? Torah, because by the giving of the Torah we find the same thing. Nemar, it says over there, Vayichan Sham Yisrael. Israel became unified. And therefore they says he camped, not they camped, he camped. Loshen Yachid in the individual, as if they all like one person. Because that's a prerequisite, that's a necessity to receive the Torah. Torah, the Jewish people merited the giving of the Torah. Now, where do we see that a prerequisite to receive the Torah is to be unified? It says so. We say it in our prayers every day. Kayeim, as it says, Barchenu Avinu. We say it in the last blessing of the Amidah of the Shemona Esrei. We say, Barchenu Avinu, bless us, Father, Kulanu ke'echad, because we are all one. That's a reason for the blessing. We're saying, bless us, Father, because we are all as one individual. We're all unified. But how do you know this is the blessing of the Torah? There's many blessings. Maybe it means give us livelihood. He's saying that this is particularly in order to receive the blessing of the Torah, we need to be one. So he says, well, let's continue. What does it say? Bless us, Father, because we are one. What do we want to be blessed with? Ba'or panecha, with the light of your countenance. What's the light of God's countenance? That's the Torah. The Torah is the light of God's countenance. How do we know? Maybe the light of his countenance is just a divine smile, a radiant smile of God, maybe some spiritual experience. How do you know that the light of his countenance is the Torah? Because what do we continue? Because in the light of your countenance, you gave us a living Torah. You see that's literally stated over there. That the light of your countenance, you're giving us the living Torah. But why are we worthy for the living Torah? Why are we asking for it? Because we're one. So we're basically saying we're ready for the light. Why are we ready? Because we're one. As he says, this is the light of the receiving of the Torah. Like he explicitly states in the Siddur, because in the light of your countenance, you gave us Torah's Chaim, a Torah of life. Because this revelation can only be is only when we are all unified together. Because there cannot be the enclosement and the revelation of the infinite one, blessed is he, who is absolute one, only in the place of unity. The point over here is the vessel has to match the light. The way it is, just like the brain is a vessel for the intelligence. You can't make a finger be the unit or the vessel, the container for intelligence. Fingers do what fingers do. Brains do what brains do. The powers of the mind manifest in the brain, because the brain is made up, the gray matter of the brain is a very fine material and is designed and purposely by God to facilitate the power of the soul of the mind. The eye, for instance, is very clear. It's a completely different type of material. It's made like a camera because it's meant to serve vision. It's a completely different, glossy, whatever, clean. It's a complete eye is very different because it's for vision, only the eye. Now, you don't see because of your eye. You see because of the power of sight. But the vessel has to match the energy. Now, when the energy is God himself, And God himself is perfectly one. He is not divisible into pieces. He is singular, or the essence of singularity. Therefore, the vessel to receive that singular being is oneness. Even though there is godliness that goes into into the pluralistic, into a plural world, into a world of many. The fact that creation is made into multiplicity and God resides in it. But God is not revealing himself in it. In creation, God is concealed. And there are some divine energies that are imbued in creation. But the manifest God himself, which happens in Torah, through Torah mitzvahs, God will reveal himself in the days of Mashiach completely inside each and every one of us, fully revealed in his as he is truly, in his singular self. So the vessel for that, and how does that happen? Through the Torah mitzvahs that we do now. So the Torah channels the singularness of God. So when we received the Torah, we needed to enter into a state of singularity and perfect oneness. And what happened was, we experienced such a deep, our differences all dissolved. Now, how literally did that happen? How did people with different ideas and different philosophies and ideology, people are so different, especially Jews. They're so opinionated. How did people like that become so unified in their consciousness? And the answer is because they experienced at that moment a transcendental dimension of their soul. They weren't operating from their human faculties. When you're operating from your human faculties, which means from our mind, from our intelligence, everybody's got a different kind of intelligence. Our minds are shaped differently. We have different ideas. We see the world differently. We understand things differently. We have our own viewpoint, our own perspective on things. But there is a place in us that's deeper than our mind. And that's our core desire for God. Over there, we're all equal. Every single one of us has a deep, essential, inexplicable, and unrational and illogical burning desire to our source. That desire, everybody's equal. It's pure, because it's not sophisticated. It's simple. It's simple. There's nothing to give it shape and form. It's just, I want, I desire, I'm burning up without any, and that is equal in everyone. And that's our deepest core of our soul. And over there, we're all the same, and it's actually one soul. It's like at the deeper level, at that level, it's really one soul. So usually that dimension of our being is in our subconscious, in our superconscious. We're not operating on that level of soul. So we're operating more on the external state of our existence, where we all have different colors and different shapes and different personas. Now, during our general history and our observance of mitzvot throughout history, it's not bad. We can channel the Torah and do mitzvot even if we're not in perfect oneness, like one person. It helps a lot when we're not fighting, when we're in a state of achdus, what we call regular achdus, when we love each other, when we care about each other, when we're one community. There's much more blessing, and generally that enables us to learn more Torah. Everything is enhanced tremendously. But even if we're not in perfect unity, we can still learn Torah, do mitzvot. It's not so. However, when it comes a moment when it has to be downloaded, the main download of it, that can't happen unless we are in total oneness. So when was it required? 2 times in our history. By the giving of the Torah in the year 2448, and about 1,000 years later by the story of Purim, when God was now going to again transmit the Torah, but on a much deeper level to register in our souls, we needed to stand in that state of absolute oneness. That's what he's explaining here. And therefore, as he says, because you can't have the enclothement and the revelation of the infinite light, blessed to see, who is the absolute true one, and therefore he cannot reveal himself only in a place of oneness, of unity, the hiskalalus and integration. And therefore, on Purim, that was the conclusion. We completed what we started at the giving of the Torah. That's why it says over there as well, V'kibel, he received, Lashon Yachid, as if it was only one person. As if they're one. One man. How will we be? What's going to bring us to the oneness? What create when people are so different? How do we become one? It's the second point that we just mentioned. The Inyan, and the idea is the Inyan is chalkas hamadregas. This that we all are different from each other. There is variations of various different levels. That begins from intellect and downward. From the mind and downward, there are differences. Like it says, even when we say mind, we don't only mean that people have different. Some people are religious, some are not. Some have this ideology, some don't have. No, I think even in our religiosity, and even in our spirituality, even in our connection to one God, everybody perceives God differently. When our connection to God is coming from our reason, from our logic, from our understanding, everybody sees God. And God reveals himself to us differently. It's not the same revelation. Can't dismiss another person's spirituality, because people will experience God differently than you. It's hard for people to accept that. People think that their spiritual way is the only way. But you should know that we have to know that's not true. God shines his light down to every individual through the unique window that person has. And the windows of each person is different. The verse says, like it says, Noida b'sha'arem baila. Her husband makes himself known in the gates. And the Zohar interprets that to me. The husband is God, but God has a lot of wives. Who are the wives? Every spiritual being who wants to be in a relationship is God's wife, a recipient of his life. Especially all the souls of Israel are all the wives of God. Now, each one of them has a different gateway, which means each one has a different way in which God shines upon them. They experience God differently. No two people have the same experience. To every person, the Zohar says, according to what they estimate in their heart. You can't say that other person's experience it's nothing, because it's not the way I had a spiritual experience that felt very different than what you're describing. And therefore what? You have a monopoly on God. It's ridiculous. Everybody according to their grasp, to their understanding. But that is where that's in the emotions that are drawn from intellect, the excitement that comes from the mind. Being that our minds are different, so our excitements are different and our experiences will be different. When our minds don't think alike, and they're not meant to think alike. The minds are colorful. And therefore the emotions are also not equal. Example, Talmidei Shammai v'Hillel, the students of Shammai and Hillel. Both of them are very pious and religious Jews, great scholars. But Shammai had a whole different take and a whole different way of relating to God than Hillel did. Two schools of halachic observance. They had so many different opinions. Zeh Paisel, this one says it's invalid. V'zeh Machshir, this one says it's valid. Same question came up to these rabbis. They said not kosher. These rabbis said yeah, kosher. Machmas, because they see and they connect and experience differently, and both are valid. Machmashinu yadeis, because of the change of minds. Even though Shammai and Hillel themselves, the fathers of these two camps, only had 3 arguments, but those 3 arguments represented fundamental different ways of looking at things, which later down the hill splintered into hundreds of differences between the followers of Shammai and Hillel. What began just as three points, and later be developed into something much larger. Avol Talmidei Nechlaku have many differences. This one grasps the intellect that they heard from their Rebbe, from their teacher, so, and this one takes it differently. So just like it is in halacha, that you can see people end up with different conclusions. Same is also in the worship of the heart, in the service of the heart, in the emotional bond. When it's coming from the intellect, which is grasped, this creates variations of spiritual experiences. And in that sense, we're not like one person. On that sense, God is shining into each and every one of our hearts in a different way. And that's wonderful, that's good, that's colorful, that's nice. But that works all the time, not when we have to go take the Torah. When we have to go take the Torah, we have to transcend that. And we have to come to a place where there's only a singular essence, as if we're one person. We're all experiencing the same thing. When was that? By the giving of the Av, but the yearning of the heart is a different story. What does it mean, the yearning of the heart? The yearning of the heart means when there's nothing there to taint the heart. There's nothing there to give shape and form to the yearning. It's just simply the heart opened up to its essential essence, where the heart is just pouring out its lava, the pure lava of the heart, not tainted, not colored, not constricted, not defined by any perception and understanding. It's just the little baby inside of us, the little quintessential child in us that is yearning to our source. Before we can sophisticate it in any sophistication, that's the pure core of the heart coming out. Over there, there's no difference. Every soul is exactly equal. But the yearning of the heart, which is the desire, which is higher than the grasping of the mind, completely higher than the mind, which is where the concept of self-sacrifice comes from. The completely willingness to disregard any calculation. When things are from the mind, there's always calculations. Is it worth it for me? Should I not? But at that time on Purim, when the people were just, it's because they opened up to God from such a deep place, from the core essence of it, there's no rational calculations. It's all the way in. They were all committed 1,000% because there's no two ways about it. Which was at the time of the decree of Haman. That's what Haman did. Haman unplunged their essence. They cleaved to God with a simple desire. And that's why the whole festivities of Purim is to remove the mind. You drink, you intoxicate, you get rid of the mind, get it out of the way, and allow the heart to come forth. Just allow the pure desire of the heart. This transcends the intellect. And grasping, at this level, everybody's equal. It's as if there's only simply, as if it's one soul, one person. If you would go into the other person's heart, you wouldn't even know it's someone else's heart. You would think it's extension of your heart because he's feeling exactly what you're feeling. It wouldn't feel foreign, different, uncomfortable, because it's literally the same feeling because it's the same essence. Mekulam yachad ki'ishechad, from all of them together, like one super being, one soul with one heart. Because once we transcend wisdom, once we go deeper than our powers of our soul, we get into our soul itself. Over there, there's no differentiation. And that's why it says he accepted in the singular. And that means through this complete nullification, and yearning of the heart, that's because it was such a deep yearning and nullification. And as a result of that, it was one heart with one yearning of all the people together that was able to draw down the Or Ein Sof, the infinite one, blessed is he. Because by him it says, he's now explaining why to attract the Or Ein Sof, God himself is only through such a type of yearning. Doesn't mean you can't have a relationship and attraction to God when you're serving him with your mind. Actually, the more common and more regular tool or ordinary tool to connect to God is through your mind, through our minds. However, that's not connecting us to God's very self. That's linking us up with divine manifestations. But by the giving of the Torah, it wasn't about manifestations. What did God say when he gave the Torah? I am God, your God. Who I really am, and I'm coming. Not some illumination of me. So through our minds, we connect to various presentations of Hashem. But not God as he is in his purely infinite, undefined state. Like it says in the verse, Kilo yarani adam, no man can see me. When we say no man can see me, it doesn't only mean physically. It means no one can see me and behold me with the eye of their mind. The mind. No intellect can grasp God. But the Zohar says, even though, and the words the Zohar uses, it says, no thought that can grasp. But the Zohar says, he doesn't mean you can't grasp him. The yearning of the heart can grasp him. But only the purest yearning of the heart. The cry of the soul. That's why, for example, another time we use this mechanism is on Rosh Hashanah. We use a shofar. The shofar also expresses. It's a simple sound. It's not sophisticated. It's that pure cry of the essence, which reaches the essence of God. And that's why it says Vikibel. Two things. First of all, it says Vikibel in singular, but that's why it also refers to the Jewish people as Yehudim. Remember, this was the last point I mentioned. The Jewish people are called now Jews. They're called Yehudim. Why? Not Israelites and not Hebrews. Why? Because Jew means surrender. Because the meaning of the word Jew comes from the word Judah. Judah comes from the tribe of Judah, which is from the word Yehudah, which the root of the word Yehudah is Hoda'ah. Hoda'ah means admission, surrender. This is the soul surrendering itself completely to God without retaining any bit of self. There's nothing that I'm not holding on to me. I'm yours, God. I'm just complete nullification, surrender. We're ready to die for you. We're ready to give ourselves over. And it's not coming from understanding how I perceive. There's no I here. It's just the pure essence to essence. And that's on Purim that was revealed, and that's why we were upgraded to be called Jews. Because we always had it in our soul, but this dimension of our being was not expressed so much. Even at Sinai, it was not expressed to this extent. Because over there it was a moment. It flashed, but for a moment. Over here it was an entire year. So it really, really, really came out at its fullest. And over there also it was pulled out by God pulling it. Over here God wasn't pulling it. Haman pulled it, because Haman provoked it. The evil provoked it. And that's what caused it to come out. It's almost like it came out from within ourselves, not from some outside stimulation, and that's why it's so much more, it's coming from a so much deeper place. Because this is the concept of admitting, and that's called admitting, which means surrendering to something that transcends my mind. Because you can't even grasp it in the mind. You can only surrender to it. Where do we see this? A Kayeim, like as the statement which we say in the end of Hallel, the conclusion of the special prayer we say on special festive days. We say Ki lecha tov lahodos. Hear these words. To you, it is good to thank. A simple meaning. To you, it's good to give thanks. Uleshimcha, and to your name, no'eh, it is beautiful lezamer, to sing. So what's this duplication? To you, ki lecha, to you, it's good to thank. To you, we should thank you. To your name, it's good to sing. What does that mean? Singing is already an excitement. It's colorful. It's beautiful. The excitement of it, that singing, that's only to God's name, because the singing comes from a perception, from an understanding. And when there is a perception and there is an understanding, that's only in God's names, in divine manifestations, in God's greatness, in the properties of God, the qualities of Hashem, personality traits of Him. But when you're dealing with God Himself, you can't sing to that, because you don't have that aspect of excitement. It's much deeper than that. All you can do is just surrender yourself completely. I can admit to it. I can't understand it, so I can't sing. Singing means I have to appreciate it, understand. I don't appreciate it. I yearn for it. I don't understand why, and I surrender myself to it completely. A song who aspires amidus is when you're getting excited. Machmasa hasaga, from understanding. Like the masters of song go out with song. The angels, they have a perception, they have an understanding, and they sing. This we can only do when it comes to your name, God. Which is only a name, represents only an external element of God, only a ray of Him. But to you yourself, Almighty, to God Almighty Himself, to you we can only surrender, because there's no thought that can grasp Him. Like we said earlier. But afterwards it says, so now we have a whole, like, beautiful, the Kibel HaYehudim. Now we finally register. The Or Ein Sof came in deeply when we were in a state of unity and in a state of Hoida'ah, Yehudim. We uncovered the Jew inside of us. Afterwards, Kimu v'kiblu HaYehudim. Later it says, Kimu, they got, remember we quoted this, that this is what the sages use for that the Jews accepted the Torah the second time. There it says, Kimu, they established, v'kiblu. Oh, it doesn't say anymore v'kibel in the singular, it says v'kiblu. And they received. So what happened suddenly? How did it become from him receiving, to they receiving? As we mentioned earlier, to be in this state of unity only happens very rarely in history. And when it happens, it doesn't last forever. You know why? Because we're not meant to stay in our transcendental, beyond self state. That's not the purpose of Torah. The purpose of Torah is that we should return into a state where we have a mind, and we have our own thinking patterns, and we have a self, and we think differently. And in each and every one, in our own individual lives, in our own unique, special way, we channel God down. So we have to go back to a world of opinions, to a world of ideas, to a world of understanding. We're not meant to stay in this nullified state. But we need the nullified state to receive it. Once we receive it, then we can go back down. That's why we went back into the many. We didn't remain in the oneness. And we're meant to go back into the many. We're meant to become back a community versus one person. We're supposed to always be backed up by that essential oneness so that we keep our communities unified. We love each other. But we still go back to being many. But he's going to explain what happens. But he says, even the second time when it says Vikiblu, they received it, the written, if you look in the Megillah, it says Vikibel without a vav. But the tradition is that we read it Vikiblu. So even in this state, Vikiblu, they received, when we are many, the written version is Vikibel. Why? Because even after we receive the Torah on a level of absolute oneness, even when we go out and we become back many, and each one studies the Torah in their own mind and their own thinking with their own perceptions and serves Hashem in their own way, that's the outside of our existence. Internally, we're still one human being. It's just that we're not tapping that. We're not conscious of it. So there is an internal and an external. And that's the difference between the way something is written and the way it's read. Written means what it is in its essence. Read means the way it comes out. You're reading it, the way it's being announced. What's the difference between something written in a book? When it's written in this book, so many people can't access it because it's Hebrew. Not only Hebrew, it's deep mystical concepts but then when we give a class, so we're reading it. By reading it, it's being revealed. It's coming out. So, but the essence, I know that when I'm giving the class, there's it's infinite more in this book than what I'm saying. So I'm nibbling a little bit, but there's an essence here. What is written is so much more. That's why everybody should take, hopefully, if you're able to, study the book on your own. Study and study, because I could be missing so much because I only have a narrow perception of it. And that's everything. The reading of something is the revelation of it. But so when the reason the Torah says the second time that they accepted, and it says both they and he, it's written he, but it's read as they, because even when we step away from the story of Purim and we move further into history, and we move into the multiplicity, or we move away from Sinai and we go into going back being many, the manyness of ourselves, the plural element of our beings is not who we really are. That's why, God forbid, if when something happens, we all suddenly feel like one again. Because there's an inside and there's an outside. That's what he's explaining. There is the way it is read, v'ksiv, and there's the way it's written. Haksiv v'kibel, it's written v'kibel, v'akri, and the way it's read, v'kiblu. They accept it. Because at the time of the decree, at the time of the year, the full year, when the Jewish people were all in a state of staring death down the right, they saw it, and as a result of that, they stood in a state of sacrifice themselves completely, which, as we said earlier, it doesn't come from sophistication. It comes from the simple essence of the Jew's heart. Then we were in a state that we were all unified as one. But afterwards, when the time passed, and the self-sacrifice was not in the forefront of their consciousness. It says the word v'kiblu, every person received according to their understanding. Everybody received differently, because we're different already. And in accordance to the vessels that we prepare, as much as you prepare yourself for Purim, or as much as you prepare yourself for any holiday, or for any mitzvah, or for any prayer, to that degree, you're going to receive in the unique way that your soul can receive, based on what you studied and what you learned and what we understand. That's how everybody draws God's light down in a unique way. And in accordance to how much one purified their body and their vessels. But still, the way it's written is still singular. Why? Because on a deeper level, we all have the potential to come back to that complete nullification of self. We have that place of self-sacrifice. And the pure yearning of a heart. We have it in potential, which means it's always there if it can be activated. And on that level, since it's there in the potential, and we all share the same potential, so at least on that deeper level of potential, we're one. But actually, it's concealed. Which on that level, there's no division. Madreges Klal, there's no split divisions and separations. Inyan Kriya, and that's the concept. That's what it means when the Torah has a word that is read one way and stated and written another way. It's because the essence is the way it's written, what it really is. That's its innermost, and the external, the way it reveals itself, is the way we read it. Ki akrisha koiden, the reading, the way we read it, zehagilui, that's the revelation. Bekoil v'dibur, with a voice and with speech, it's coming out. There's a letter in a book. Now you're adding sound to it. The person is saying it, and you're speaking it, and then it comes out openly. Vaksiv, and the way it is documented in the book, even though it's not revealed, that's the potential. The Megillah is in potential all year long. I give simply in the Megillah. The story of Megillah says it's potential all year long. It's there. I have the Megillah in my house. It's there. It's in potential. And Purim comes, it's actualized because it's read. So the potential, the Megillah as it's written is it in its private state and when it's read out. But on that level of potential, we continuously maintain that singularity. It says Kimu v'kiba la Yehudim in the singular, Aleim v'alzaram, on them and their children. This concludes the discourse, and I will say that even after I taught this discourse, I feel that this discourse is above and beyond me. The whole concept of the bina, the middle part was not. But good to learn it. Sure, we're going to learn it again when Mashiach comes. We're going to go over it, then see. Okay, 3 weeks, but we got it done. Kayeim. Hopefully next week we can learn something for Pesach. Prepare for the up-and-coming holiday. Next Thursday night is no more going to be Adar. It's at least going to be Nisan. So we finished the Adar Maimer. Be well, everyone. Mashiach should be here now.